Hello, wrestling fans. Just a quick video, really, to discuss something which came up in today's news, which I thought was an important thing to discuss and maybe open up a discussion on, see what some of you guys think. And that is that in the UK, there has been a new committee which is pushing for wrestling to be regulated as a regular sport. Um, this is focusing on the fact that, and obviously last year in the summer you had this horrible scandal, this evidence that was brought out, and almost like a Me Too movement in wrestling, in effect, where there was horrible examples and stories of abuse and kind of sexist misogyny, all the rest of it, just horrible stories that came out of training and came out of not just wrestling that dates back many years, but modern wrestling, more recent stories, which is terrible to hear, and certainly a problem within the wrestling industry, like it is in most industry. No matter how much we think we've moved on, and certainly we have in some areas, there is still a big problem. So this new committee, which has been brought by the Labour MP Alex Davies Jones, would look into regulating wrestling as a sport, at least at the training level, because that is obviously where a lot of this has come out. And there's been terrible stories about people training for wrestling as young as 13, being abused. So something that the industry has to get on top of. Obviously, wrestling in this country may be viewed very differently to the way it is in the States. It's obviously more complex in the States because you've got so many different states, and different states probably sort of view it in a different way and handle it in their own sort of way. But anyone in the States who sees this video, I would be happy to let me know your thoughts and some of the differences. But yeah, I mean, this committee is targeting that and saying that wrestling, at least, because it brings up the debate about wrestling, is it sport or is it theatre? I think in reality it's a cross between the two, but certainly this committee is arguing that at training level it should be considered as a sport. So one of the things they're looking to do is that they would ensure criminal record background checks for the coaches, and that certainly has to be a good idea when you hear some of the stories that came out last summer. And it would also ensure then, wrestlers training would get COVID relief, for example, because at the moment, because wrestling isn't deemed a sport, then people who train in wrestling, train to be wrestlers, don't get the same sort of coverage, the same sort of COVID relief. And that sort of has to be wrong, really, if you think about it, regardless of what you think of wrestling or where it lands on sport, theatre, what. It kind of doesn't matter that, they're still training to be a wrestler, they're still putting themselves out there in an industry, and this is something which, yeah, I think they should get as well. So it's a first step, but it's certainly a welcome step for me, this new committee, and just taking this a little more seriously, because there's a lot of vulnerable people, women and very young people in wrestling, in what the report describes as a very old-fashioned masculine sort of culture. And I can't disagree with that. I think it still is a very masculine sort of old-fashioned culture. I think that even extends to, I'm not going to demonize fans, because I think a lot of wrestling fans are great and progressive, and it's probably a minority, but there certainly is still an ugly side to wrestling fans when it comes to just being quite sexist and, handing out abuse to female performers and all that. We've come a long way, obviously, in wrestling and in sport, but we have a long way to go. And just on the subject, is wrestling sport or theatre? I mean, I always deem it a sport with obviously a huge element of entertainment. It is more of an entertainment than sport, but I deem it a sport simply because there is a skill factor involved. when it's done right. There's a skill factor to putting on a match and to doing the moves that are, in theory, reasonably safe and controlled. There's a skill to that, there's an art to that, and you are still doing, in an effect, a sort of a move, even if it is partly theatre and nothing, in theory, dangerous is going to happen. So it's sort of a sport with a huge entertainment element, and it is a beautiful mix of theatre and sport when it works right. And that's not me saying that. That's Toadie from Neighbours. So what else do you people want? But yeah, just a little comment on that at the end. But also for you guys to weigh in. Do you think this committee is a good thing? Do you think wrestling in England should be like regulated like a regular sport would be? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you guys again soon. Stay safe.